3rd. So just a little background when it comes to hybrid technology and experience with the technology and who the leader is. We're the unprecedented leader in hybrid technology. So we sell 8 models. Actually, if you count our plug-in versions and also include the upcoming Sienna and Venza, we have 10 models that we currently sell in the US. And since the late 90s, when we had introduced the original Prius in Japan, we've sold over 15 million hybrids across the Toyota and Lexus lineup. So we have the most experience, the most sales, and the best reliability, as you'll see in a second. Honda has currently 4 models they sell, hybrid models they sell in the US, totaling 4 million over that same time period. They actually came out with their hybrid about the same time we did the Prius. So you can see we've outsold them by a factor of 4. And then we're including Hyundai in there, and you can see they're relatively new to the hybrid game and have very few sales comparatively to Toyota and even Honda at this point. So that's always something to bring up with your customers. We're the ones with the most experience. And experience and reliability. So this is the 2020 J.D. Power VDS, which is vehicle dependability. So it looks at 3-year-old vehicles and the problems per 100. And you can see where Toyota is. We're always at the top of the non-low tree rankings year after year. Hyundai is kind of hovering there right above that industry average, Hyundai Kia. And surprisingly, Honda is well below the industry average. So I'm pretty sure the Honda salespeople aren't pulling out this VDS study and raving about how they're beating Ram and Mitsubishi in dependability. They certainly don't want their customers to see this, but you do. As a Toyota salesperson, this is something that you should have at your desk. So let's start with the head-to-heads, and we'll start with Prius versus Insight. Now, we did go over this the past Friday when we did the complete Toyota versus Honda comparison. So this is a good review. And if you remember, we actually compared Corolla hybrid to the Insight. So either the Prius or the Corolla hybrid does compare well to the Honda Insight. And if you remember, the original Honda Insight was a very funky looking, like 2-seater car that came out right before the original Prius did. And it got really good gas mileage and kind of, along with Prius, set the bar for hybrid technology. The current Honda Insight is actually a Honda Civic hybrid. It's a Honda Civic with a little nicer interior, but it's basically a Civic body. And you'll see that they offer 3 different trim levels, where we offer 4, and at a slightly lower MSRP. And we'll explain why that's the case and the extra stuff that you get with the Toyota to kind of offset that. And always remember that you're getting great incentives with the Prius this month, the $1,000 customer cash. So that kind of wipes out that MSRP advantage right away. And then we'll show you extra stuff as it relates to value as far as equipment goes. But let's start with powertrain, because that's what hybrid customers will focus on initially. What is the EPA rating on the window sticker? And if you look at Prius versus Honda Insight, they are essentially identical with a 52 combined EPA rating. So, but as you know, with most Toyotas, the EPA rating is just a starting point for your fuel economy. Many customers easily beat the EPA ratings with real driving and are pleasantly surprised. So we tend to kind of under-promise and over-deliver as far as fuel economy is concerned, where our competitors tend to try to maximize the EPA rating, even if the car is not going to get quite that rating when you drive it for real. So a good example is Car and Driver does something called a 75-mile-an-hour test. It's basically a highway fuel economy test. And when they run the Prius, it gets 52 going that speed, which is actually 2 mpg over the highway rating that the EPA gives you. So again, under-promise, over-deliver on the fuel economy on the Toyota. If you look at the Insight, it actually gets to less than the EPA rating for highway mileage. So there's actually a 5 mpg difference between the two at highway speeds. So 5 mpg, that's a 10% fuel economy advantage for the Prius in real driving over the Insight. And over time, that obviously adds up to more money in the customer's pocket. Now, where the Insight does have an advantage over the Prius is total system horsepower at 151 versus 121. So it does get up and go. It has that little turbo motor, so it has good acceleration. Not that the Prius doesn't, but the Honda Insight definitely has quicker acceleration. Also keep in mind when customers are looking at hybrids, they will be concerned about battery life and replacement cost, and that's where we shine as far as warranty goes. We recently, with the 20 model year Toyota hybrids, increased the warranty to 10 years, 150,000 miles on the battery across the board. So Honda's still using an 8100 warranty, so we have extra 2 years and 50,000 extra miles covering the battery. So that's a big deal for customers. Make sure they understand that difference. So this is where you get more value, and we are comparing the base models of these two vehicles. Things like CarPlay, Alexa, Sirius XM, as you know, are essentially standard on Toyotas now, regardless of trim level. With Honda, they still make you move up from the base to the EX, or maybe even the Touring model in some cases, to get features that are standard on Toyotas. In the case of the Alexa compatibility, it's not even available on Honda, so Honda customers miss out on that. Additionally, the base screen size on Hondas is 5 inches diagonal. That's a tiny screen. That's probably smaller than your smartphone screen and will look very dated and old tech to customers. So make sure they understand they're getting very kind of cheaper tech, a cheaper look, certainly when they get a base model Honda versus a Toyota. And then there's more. There's more value in the Toyota when you look at certain safety features like airbags. And this is new for 2021 model Prius. It gets an extra 2 airbags, so now it has a total of 10, similar to Corolla and Camry. And the Insight only offers 6. So Hondas will typically have 6. Some models have 7 or 8, but most have 6. So in this case, we have 4 more airbags, and that's definitely a talking point with customers as far as safety goes. And then cool systems like the intelligent clearance sonar with park assist, standard on a Prius, not available at all on an Insight. And then Safety Connect, Wi-Fi Connect, right? Standard across the board on newer Toyotas. You have to go all the way up to the Touring model Insight to get that sort of connected service. Blind spot monitor, something customers do look for these days. Standard on that Prius LE and not available on the Insight. So a lot of great advantages on the safety side there. So just to wrap up Prius versus Insight, the Prius does have better real-world driving efficiency, as we saw with that Car and Driver test. So point customers to third-party sources like Car and Driver in this case, or Consumer Reports is usually a good one, where they'll have an actual fuel economy on a real driving test. And that's where the Toyota will shine. And then standard technology like CarPlay, Android Auto, and then Safety Connect, and also on the safety side, airbags are definitely an advantage for Prius. Don't forget about the great incentives as well, in case the customers are just looking at sticker price initially. And always remember to throw in Toyota Care, because that's an added value that you get with every new Toyota. It's again, money that customers are going to keep in their pocket. It lowers the ownership cost, and Honda does not offer that like we do. So that's Prius versus Insight. And just to kind of give another perspective from Car and Driver, when they did the comparison, they actually said, if you want to get a Civic, you might as well get the gas, because the Insight, which is just a little bit of a nicer Civic, is much more expensive than the gas version, and it doesn't really get that much better gas mileage in real driving. So the Prius is the one that's going to give you the outstanding gas mileage on a consistent basis in real driving, whereas they say kind of skip the Insight and just get the gas Civic if you really want a Honda. But of course, you don't want a Honda. You want a Toyota. All right, so let's talk about the Prime, which is obviously the plug-in version of the Prius, versus a different model Honda, which is the Clarity plug-in hybrid. Now, the Honda Clarity actually comes in 3 different forms. It comes as a plug-in, it comes as a full electric, and also a fuel cell. So we'll just talk about the plug-in hybrid version. And they offer 2 different models, the basic one, the base one, which they call plug-in hybrid, and then a touring model, which is kind of loaded. So the Clarity plug-in is a unique body style. And you can see it's very funky, maybe even more funky than a Prius, with that weird front end and the weird side skirts over the rear wheels. So it does look distinct on the road, certainly. And you'll notice looking at MSRP that it is more expensive than the comparable Prius Prime. And you will also notice that it does qualify for a larger federal tax credit. And that's strictly based on the size of the battery and the electric range. So that's why it has more. We'll talk about that more in a second. But also remember the fantastic incentives on the Prius Prime. So how much was that customer cash? It was $4,000 customer cash. So keep that in mind when we're talking about comparing these two. We have incredible incentives on the Prime. So let's start with powertrain. And this is really a story of what the focus is for each of these cars. Prius Prime is focused on overall efficiency with good EV range. The Clarity, Honda kind of went for emphasizing the EV range over the overall efficiency and driving range. So when you look at fuel economy numbers, you'll see the Prius Prime is much, much better than the kind of low 40s EPA rating for the Clarity plug-in. It's actually 12 mpg better combined. But the trade-off is the EV range on the Clarity is much better. It's almost twice as many miles as the Prius Prime at 47. Okay, so that's kind of the balance there. It may depend on how the customer will use the vehicle, but what you want to stress with the Prius Prime is if you don't plug it in, or you don't get the chance to plug it in, or you use up your electric range, you're still going to get regular Prius hybrid gas mileage, which is fantastic. It's mid-50s and potentially higher. Also look at the size of the fuel tank in the Clarity. So that larger battery, that lithium battery, does require compromise. In one place is a smaller fuel tank. Maybe they found a motorcycle tank from one of the Hondas and put it in this thing. It's only 7 gallons, where ours is more of a normal 11.4. So what that translates to is a total driving range, including a full fuel tank and the electric range, of 300 more miles with the Prius Prime versus the Clarity. So what does that mean? It means more trips to fuel if you're not plugging it in essentially every day and staying within that EV range. So more trips to the gas station, or again, the inconvenience of having to stop when you're doing longer trips. With the Prius Prime, you don't have to stop. In fact, when it first came out, we did a trip from our office in North Jersey all the way to Buffalo, New York, and back a little over 700 miles on 1 tank of fuel and a couple charges. That's the incredible range of the Prius Prime. So as you see from this chart, the battery on the Clarity is essentially twice as large, which gives you that range that is almost twice as many miles as the Prius Prime. But here's another compromise. The charge time on regular household voltage, which frankly most people will be using, is, in this case, it's over twice as long. It's 12 hours. So most people will just plug in a regular household voltage. They won't bother purchasing a level 2 charger and having it in, maybe an extra line installed by an electrician, a 240-volt line. So most people will charge by electric household voltage using the supplied charging cable. and the Prius Prime can plug in and charge in a relatively short 5.5 hours. So overnight, obviously 12 hours, it doesn't matter too much, but if you want to get a charge during the day or maybe while you're at work, you can get a full charge on a Prius Prime, where the Clarity plug-in, you're going to be challenged to do that. Now on a 240 volt, a level 2 charger, they are closer in charge time, actually just 20 minutes different, so there's a difference there. But like I said, unless you purchase that and you have it at home or you use a public charging station, you're going to be spending a lot more time on a charger with the Clarity. Again, battery warranty, you want to stress this with this Prime versus Clarity comparison as well, or any of the Toyota versus Honda comparisons. We give you the extra years or the extra mileage, in fact, 50% more mileage. And there's more. So airbags, 10 versus 7 in this case, so 3 more. And then how about touchscreen size? You get that really nice 11.6-inch screen in the limited Prius Prime, and you only get an 8-inch screen in the Honda. Safety Connect, again, standard. The fact that it's not available in a Clarity is a big selling point. You want to talk about how Safety Connect gives you peace of mind. This is another compromise due to the larger battery in the Clarity. You lose 4.3 cubic feet of cargo space compared to the Prius. So that 15.5 is relatively small. That's like the trunk of a typical sedan. So in a vehicle that's more like a hatch type vehicle, you would expect better utility and cargo. You get that with the Prius. You don't get that with the Honda. And of course, Toyota Care is something that we have you want to stress. So while the Clarity does have better EV driving range, the Prius Prime has better gas efficiency, overall better driving range by 300 miles, standard Safety Connect, 3 more airbags, Toyota Care, and unbelievable incentives this year, including $4,000 customer cash. And keep in mind, when you talk about tax credits, those are available post-purchase, and it's only if the customer purchases a vehicle and if they actually owe taxes during that tax year. So there are some factors that may preclude people from taking advantage of those. Make sure they are aware that it's not taken off the purchase price at the time of purchase. Okay, so that's Prius versus the 2 Honda vehicles. Let me throw it over to Jeremy, and he's going to take over the Hyundai comparison.
All right, thanks, Brian. So good morning, everyone, and I'd like to really cover the new Hyundai Ioniq. Now, the Ioniq is very similar to the Clarity in that it comes in 3 different versions. They have a hybrid version, they have a plug-in hybrid, which we'll also cover, and then they have a full electric. Of course, we don't have an electric car right now, so we're not going to cover that vehicle. But you can see here on the hybrid version of the Ioniq, it's got 4 grades, very similar to the Prius. Price point, you're looking at, it's about $1,000 less than the Prius, a little bit smaller car overall. So as we look at it, the fuel economy rating here, it looks pretty good actually, the gas mileage. So 54, 50, and 52 on Prius, where the Ioniq gets about 55 combined, so an additional 3 miles per gallon. But if you look at some of the independent reviews, like Consumer Reports, for example, when they averaged out the mileage in both vehicles, they averaged 52 in both. So that's what the Prius is rated. So the Ioniq's rating versus the real world is a little bit higher. So actual mileage is going to be about the same. Engine-wise, of course, we know our powertrain of 1.8. They have a little bit smaller 1.6 liter. Let's have a little bit more horsepower. But what we've always talked about in terms of hybrids and their performance, the numbers on the horsepower rating aren't really telling the whole story. With our electronic CVT and the electric motors in our powertrain, we have instant torque. Hyundai uses a little bit more primitive system that uses a conventional 6-speed automatic transmission in their hybrids. So we don't have a transmission, and that's kind of the most expensive and complex part of a vehicle typically. And if you have to replace it, it's very, very costly. So we've eliminated that and replaced it with 2 electric motors and a gear set, which are not only very reliable, right? But there's no wearable or maintenance, wearable parts or maintenance that you'll have to do on those. Now airbags, just like most of our competitors, we're going to have more. We're going to have 10 in the Prius, starting with 2021 model year versus 7 in the Ioniq. We also have some additional safety in terms of our pre-collision system, which the Ioniq does have, but we have pedestrian detection and the Ioniq does not. We also have standard safety connect. Now Hyundai does offer their BlueLink system. They have various versions of BlueLink depending on what subscriptions you would like to go for or pay for. And we also have standard ICS with parking assist, and it's not available on the Hyundai. Now that's a great feature because if you're parking, if you're backing into a spot, you don't see that there's a post or even a person, any object, it will detect and warn you. And if you don't go ahead and stop, it will apply the brakes and stop you before you make contact with that object. So saves your bumpers, right? Saves you from having a small accident. Works under 9 miles an hour. And of course, our big advantage now with Prius in this segment is the fact that we have all-wheel drive available on both LE and XLE grades. All right, now the Prius Prime. So it's going to be very similar, obviously, just a little bit different powertrain. Pricing-wise, you can see it's still about the same, $1,000 more for the Prius versus the Ioniq. Tax credits are very similar. Ours is 4502, theirs is 4543. So not a really big difference in terms of that. But don't forget, we have that $4,000 customer cash this month. Powertrain, here's where we do shine a little bit in terms of fuel economy. So Prius Prime does get a little bit better gas mileage. It's 52 combined. They only give a combined rating on the Ioniq. They don't give a city highway rating, and ours is 54. So we get about 2 more miles per gallon. EV range is similar. We're 25, they're 29. So they do have a slight advantage in terms of the EV range, about 4 miles. Gas tank size is about the same, so the driving range is going to be very similar. I mean, we've got an additional 10 miles of driving range, not really a big deal. But when you look at the battery size, they're, again, very, very similar. Ours is 8.8 kilowatt hours, theirs is 8.9. But there is a big difference in the charging time, where ours in a household 120 volt outlet would take 5.5 hours to charge. You're going to see 9 hours on the Ioniq. So not a big deal if you're charging it overnight, but if you come home, you want to charge it for a few hours and then go out on another trip, obviously you're going to get a lot better range from the Prius Prime than you would the Ioniq. But a 240 volt charger, so one of those more commercial level 2 chargers, you can see the times are very similar. 2.1 for the Prius, 2.3 for the Ioniq. And of course we have that longer battery warranty, so 10-year, 150,000 mile warranty on the Prius. Again, 8 airbags versus the 7 in the Ioniq. But we do have that bigger screen, so they have an 8-inch diagonal screen. We've got the 11.6 in XLE and limited grades, so much bigger touchscreen. And again, we have that eCVT transmission, very reliable, gives you a lot of torque at low speed, so the acceleration off the line is very good in Prius, where the Hyundai uses still that old 6-speed automatic technology. And if you look at some of the reviews of the Ioniq, they're pretty much the same across the board, whether it's Consumer Reports or Car and Driver. Ioniq has a delayed launch off the line and subpar braking performance. Now that delayed launch is probably due in part to the fact it has this 6-speed automatic transmission coupled with an electric motor. So there is a little bit of a delay there, where our torque is more instant off the line. They didn't like the way the car handled in terms of braking, and they thought the interior wasn't that great. In fact, they said it was a bit lacking, with everything in the cabin being hard plastic and barely any padding on the armrests. So just a little insight, it does cost a little bit less than the Prius, about $1,000, but it's you can see that in the difference in the quality, obviously our reliability, but also in the materials inside the new Prius. Nice soft touch, leather feel materials, larger screen, and a lot better track record in terms of the hybrid technology, since we've been selling hybrids and then the Prius actually since 1997 in Japan, early 2000 here in the US. So we've got a lot of experience. Hyundai's only been doing it for about 5 years. So in closing here, we've got obviously the experience, like I said, over 23 years of experience selling hybrid technology. We've got that reliability that Toyota is known for, as in the J.D. Power VDS survey that we showed. Of course, we're very efficient. We have a lot of standard safety across the board in all of our vehicles. And of course, our standard audio tech with CarPlay, Amazon Alexa, and the standard connected services with Safety Connect and Wi-Fi Connect. Of course, don't forget about Toyota Care, especially against Honda, where they don't offer anything like that.